Hey everyone, MacAndSwiss here, and welcome back to another episode of the Roblox Ultimate Scripting Guide. So today we are going to go over if statements as well as while and for loops. If you are currently enjoying the series, please support the series by dropping a like and commenting and suggesting what you would like to see next in the series. That would be appreciated. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. So first, let's answer some pretty basic questions. So what is an if statement? Well, an if statement is simply a test that will run some specified code if a statement is true. That's why it's called an if statement. In Lua, if statements can be simply created by saying if followed by your test. So in my case, I'm just going to say like, let's say, workspace dot baseplate dot anchored not archivable anchored is equal to true. We will first type in what we want, and then we will also finish that off by typing then, and then after that we can just press enter and Roblox will automatically complete the statement for us. So whatever is inside of here will run if the statement is true. In our case right now, the base plate in the workspace is anchored, so we can just say something basically print this base plate is anchored. And when we press run, you'll see that this base plate is anchored. And one neat little trick that you can do with if statements is that this will automatically check if this is true. So technically you don't actually need to put this into the code right here. And make sure that, and this is a very, very common mistake, that you use two equal signs when you're checking for something instead of just one. One equal sign is when you're setting a something to a value. So we talked a little bit about that in episode 1 with variables, whereas two equal signs is checking whether or not something is, well, something else. So we can actually take this out and it will run exactly the same as before. This base plate is anchored. So you might see this sometimes in other scripts where they don't have a check. So you don't know whether or not what it's checking for. Most of the time it'll be checking if something is true. Now let's say that you want to run this if this is anchored, but you also want to have something else run if it is not true. And I sort of gave it away with that. We are going to be talking a little bit about the else statement. So what we're going to do is that we're going to actually go down to the bottom here, and we're going to actually replace the end over here with an else. We're going to press enter, and Roblox will automatically add another end. Now, whatever is inside of here will run if the statement is not true. So we can say print this base plate is not anchored. And if I go into the workspace, go into the base plate, and actually unanchor it, when I press run, you will see that it prints this base plate is not anchored. Awesome. Now, this is cool and all, but we also have one other issue. What if we want to check for something else? Well, a very simple way that you can do this is inside the else statement, you can just make another if statement inside the else. If you want to be a little bit more neat, what you can also do is that you can turn this else into an else if. So we check here, and we also have to type in then. Awesome. So that's pretty much it for if statements. So let's move on to the loops. So let's talk a little bit about loops, and we're going to start with the first one, which is going to be the while loop. Now, the while loop does pretty much what it says, right? It runs code while a certain statement is true. You can do this very, very simply in Lua by typing while and then your statement. So we're going to use our old statement and we're going to use it for all of these. You can put in your own statement, whatever you want here. And the same thing works, the same trick works, so we can just delete that last part. And instead of putting then, we are going to use the keyword do. So while the base plate is anchored, we are going to do code in here. So we're going to say the base plate is anchored. And this is where I need to stop you for just a little bit. This code runs, specifically while loops run very, very often, and they have a chance of actually crashing your Roblox Studio. What I recommend people to do is, well, in most cases, I recommend them to not really use while loops at all, but if you need to, make sure that you have some sort of wait. So I'm just going to use the keyword wait and just type in the number of seconds that you want. In this case, I want the code to run about every 1 second. This isn't very optimal code, but it'll work for our demonstration purposes. So when we press run, you'll notice that it says the base plate is anchored, the base plate is anchored, and it'll continue to say that. Cool. So let's say that you have, hypothetically, some sort of counter here, and we'll say local counter equals 0. And we can say while counter is less than, let's say, 10, right? We can say counting up. And we can add in the counter as well, why not? And we will also add one to the counter using counter equals counter plus 1. And also a really neat trick that you can do here is instead of doing that, now Lua allows you to use plus equals 1. Cool. So this is going to start at 0. While this counter is less than 10, we are going to count up, add 1, and then we'll wait. So when we press run, counting up 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Well, actually, 10 doesn't run. And the reason why is because we're checking while the counter is less than 10, not less than or equal to 10. So if you wanted to also include 10, make sure to add the equal sign as well. What we have here is basically a for loop. So for loops. For loops essentially run a specific code for a specific amount of times. It's not like a while loop, which can technically run. Oops, sorry about that. It's not like a while loop where it can run forever, or like a repeat loop where it can run until something happens. A for loop has a specific ending. So let's take a look at for loops. So for loops and creating a for loop is a little bit complicated in vanilla Lua in Roblox. And I'm going to walk you through this right after I actually type it out myself. So let's break this down step by step. This is basically the code that we just ran, with the exception of we should probably add in a wait as well, just in case. So we obviously start by saying that it's a for loop. And here we put in what we started out as. Now I'm doing something a little bit fancy just so we can see the counter, but normally you can also just get rid of this part. So it'll just be whatever number you want to start at. So 0, 20, whatever you want. The second number is the number that you're going to stop at. So in our case, it's going to be 10. And the third number is going to be the number that it counts up by. So in our case, we are counting up by 1. And whatever is inside here will be, the code will be run every single time. So when we press run, counter 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Awesome. And then it stops right there. So For a for loop, this actually does include the last number, unlike something that we did previously with the while loop. Now, you might be wondering, how do I actually use this in my Roblox code? Now, for me personally as a Roblox developer, I don't see the need to really use while loops that often, but I tend to use quite a few for loops. And for loops are especially useful when you're doing something that needs to apply to everyone, especially when it comes to players, right? So when you are doing something in Roblox and something that you can really do really neatly with Roblox is that, and we will go over this a little bit more in detail in my next episode, which is going to be all about tables. So bear with me here. So we are just going to say for index player in pairs game.players, so we're getting the player service, colon get children do. So what this is going to do, and what this code essentially does, is that for every single player inside the player list, we are going to do something. So we can just say print hello, followed by the player.name. Cool. So when we press play, so I believe why this isn't working is because this is actually running before there's any players that are in the game. So something that we can try instead of doing players, we can do part, and instead of game.players, we can say game.workspace. And I'm not too sure whether or not this needs to be capitalized. I'm gonna say that it probably does, and we can just press run, and it'll say item workspace 13 times because I put workspace.name. All right, so we're gonna actually press run this time, and hopefully it works. Nice. All right, and you'll see that everything that is a part of the workspace at the most shallow level, right? We're just getting the children. We're not getting everything. Will be printed out here with their names. So camera, base plate, terrain, 6 parts, a spawn location, a part 1, a test part, and a cutscene cameras folder. So we will go over this a little bit more in detail in the next episode regarding tables, but for that, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, my name is MacAndSwiss, the most Asian brony on the internet, and I'll see you all next time.